Richards trying to scoot in there alone. It pinballs to the crease.
Let's get it.
Oh my God! Here we go.
You're listening to the Pod Street Blues Podcast with your hosts, Derrik.
How you gonna get it, Bobby?
John. Matt Casey.
Unnecessary, but totally necessary.
And Cody.
What's not to love?
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to a long-awaited episode of the Pod Street Bullies. My name is Derrik.
And I'm Matt. Hey, I'm stepping in for John. I feel like It's been like the last episode we did, had Russia even invaded Ukraine? Has it been that long?
It's been a long time. And I've been just chomping at the bit to get back on here. And lo and behold, what brought us here is what we've been talking about probably ad nauseum for how long now. The Flyers coaching search now has finally ended, per the report here from Kevin Weeks that we got on Twitter probably about an hour to an hour and a half ago, being Thursday evening. We have a new coach, folks, and that new coach's name is John Tortorella. I just want to go on record once again and say that I've wanted Tortorella since we hired Vigneault. I'm ecstatic about this, but we'll get into it. We're going to talk about general reactions.
We're going to have to go back to the tape on that. Have you been pushing Torts this whole time? I honestly don't remember.
I've wanted John Tortorella for a long time. I always thought, and again, we'll get into it in more detail here in a little bit, but I always thought it was the perfect personality for this team, especially considering where we're at now. Mm-hmm. I just, the stars aligned. I mean, I'm not saying this is the guy that's going to turn this into a dynasty, but I'm happy about it because of the personality, because of the demanding nature of John Tortorella. It just makes me happy and awesome. I'm not going to sit here and say I told you so, but
Derrick's happiness is number one. So I love it, but
paramount importance.
Look, was I always a Torts proponent, and was I pushing for him? No. I've actually gone on record and saying I actually wanted nothing to do with the guy. However, I've gone through a long therapeutic emotional journey, and looking at it, assuming that it becomes official, and still it's not official yet, but all signs are pointing to it happening and being called officially by the Flyers within the next day or so. I'm not upset with it by any means. I think Torts brings a lot that can really help this team and the current state of this team and the players that we have, and his style. It's not going to be comfortable for everyone, but I'm comfortable with the hire. I'm on board. I'm not going to be one of those whiny babies on Twitter who's like, "Oh, here we go. What a crummy friend." It's like, shut up, you tool.
What a good old boys hire. Get out of here.
The only question mark where you're like, couldn't we have done this in January?
Right.
Couldn't that have been a thing? But who wanted to jump into that dumpster fire roller coaster ride?
I think too, the way it worked out, I think honestly is for the better. You want to see if you have something potentially in Yo without spending any extra money. I get that,
Mm-hmm.
And sure, you can say Comcast has the money, they can spend it, whatever. But there was an evaluation period happening. Yo, I guess he's going to be going to Vancouver here, it looks like, which good for him. Happy for him. Yep. Hopefully he has some success there. It wasn't the end of the world that he took over as the Flyers head coach. I think that the players liked him, which is good. Mm-hmm. They seemed to play for him, aside from the fact that some of them forgot what a line change is. But at the same rate, I think that it's spanning to this proves that there was due diligence done, and that this search wasn't just big name John Tortorella. He's been to a Stanley Cup Finals. He's won a Stanley Cup before. He'll do. There was, right. It was more methodical than what some people will lead you to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I know we'll get into this a little bit more on, the main episode on Monday versus our knee-jerk reactions here. But, you have people are like, oh, the Flyers is a business. Like, yes, it's a business. Absolutely. It's always been a business. Like, just because Ed Snyder died doesn't mean it stopped being, it was never a business and Comcast took over. Like, it's always been a business, and any business hire from an executive level, which is what a coach is. And I would also argue that Tortorella, because of the lack of current top end talent on the team, Tortorella is now the face of the Flyers. Like he's it, and you got to go in and you got to do your diligence, because we've seen coaching fumbles, and I'm not talking like performance fumbles. I'm talking PR and disastrous Blackhawks-esque fumbles of coaching hires. And you can't afford to do that. And there's no guarantee that it works out, but I don't hate the fact that the Flyers did their diligence on this.
Yeah, it's a pivotal moment in the franchise's history right now, because as much as we want to sit here and say, yeah, we can compete, yeah, we, aggressive retool, whatever it might be, I don't think we're there yet. But I think that bringing in a guy like Tortorella and changing the dynamic of this team with the players that are on the team and could be on the team, I think it's a step in the right direction because, and again, we'll probably get into more detail on our main episode here coming, I believe, Monday night. But we're going to find out real quick, in my mind, and I'm sure your mind as well, which players are going to rise to the occasion, which are going to fit the mold, which are going to be Tortorella guys, if you will. And we're going to find out which guys are going to fold under the pressure and not want to play for a coach that demands, honestly, more.
Right. And, it's tough saying, I still can't put my finger on what went wrong with AV, and I'm over it. It's done, but you were hoping that would have yielded more success versus just 1 year of of decent success that we then held on to for 2 more years. But you look at what Tortorella brings to this, and in talking to a friend of mine who's a huge hockey fan, diehard Rangers fan, I'm like, what do you think of Torts? And he just says gets the best out of his players regardless of age or status. And I think that's a huge thing. We keep on talking about the potential for this guy, the potential for that guy, the potential for Provorov, the potential for Konechny, those kind of like middle, hey, you're not rookies yet. You're not rookies anymore. You're not on the older echelon. Like you're the quote unquote core that needs to get the most bang for your buck. And that includes Carter Hart as well. How do you squeeze the most out of those guys? And I would be hard pressed to say there's a better coach to do that with that age group than Tortorella. And sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good. Keep going.
And ultimately, what you're looking at is the accountability factor. And the accountability factor with this team, combined with the fact that there are no superstar egos yet. Maybe there is, down the road. But there shouldn't be. We've been absolutely horrific for 2 seasons in a row. There is nobody on the Flyers roster currently, and I caveat that with currently, that should have any sort of ego being like, I know better than John Tortorella. Like, we have hit rock bottom, but there's talent. There's talent on this team. I don't know if it's the right mix of players, and I'm sure this is where Chuck will really jump in the offseason and hopefully make some changes that, similar to what he made last year. But if there's a guy who can squeeze the best out of untapped talent, I think it's Tortorella.
I think there's a lot to unpack with what you just said, and I want to start with the Vigneault Torts comparison here, because when I shouldn't say when, but like comparing the two, you look at it, it's almost as if they're kind of cut from the same cloth, aside from the fact that Tortorella seems to be more of a dominant force, if you will, like in a locker room where he's the demanding one, AV. But they've also had success with multiple teams. AV with Vancouver, Tortorella obviously with Tampa, New York. Like he's had success in Columbus. They swept the
even in Columbus.
the
like, yeah,
Yeah, like a
Yeah,
pretty
and that's a tough market
okay-
to have success in, right?
Yeah, and a team that really wasn't expected to do anything against Tampa Bay in that year in the playoffs and swept them. I mean, you're talking about two guys that know how to win in this league, and I think that AV's style wasn't conducive because I really do think that the players in the Flyers locker room are the type of players that do kind of need that extra kick in the pants, you know? And whether that says good things or bad things about them, it is what it is. But Tortorella's the right guy for that. AV wasn't going to be that guy. You know, to our knowledge, it sounded like AV wasn't very involved, you know, in a lot of the stuff. And it just, that's not the type of players that we have, whether that means we need new players, whether that means the new coach Tortorella is going to fit that mold. I think the latter. I think Tortorella fits that mold perfectly. And going back to the main argument of when AV was hired about how he doesn't play kids, doesn't want to play the kids, put the kids in the lineup. Are you hearing that as much with Tortorella right now?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so either because I haven't either. And I just
Is
find
that
it
a thing though? Is that a thing?
I don't think so. I really don't. And I think that like it was even disproven with AV because I even went back. I was writing for Philly Sports Network at the time. I went back to, you know, his years in Vancouver, his years in New York. Like he was playing young players and he was playing them over veterans. And it just, you know, it's funny to me that like they're going to complain about like AV's a dinosaur, like Tortorella's, you know, a good old boy and like almost, you know, to the same effect as, you know, being a dinosaur. But like that's the problem with AV. But there's a whole separate issue with Tortorella that, again, doesn't jive with me. But the next point you brought up being the goalies. And I think that if anybody in the Flyers locker room should be excited, it's Carter Hart. It should 100% be Carter Hart because Tortorella's worked with some of the best goalies to ever play this game. Henrik Lundqvist, he's worked with Roberto Luongo, even in his time at Columbus with Bobrovsky. You know, he's had phenomenal goaltending and he's gotten every ounce out of those goalies. And I'm really anxious to see what he can teach Carter Hart and what Carter Hart can learn and retain from him moving forward because we're at a point in his career where it's not necessarily make it or break it, but this is going to shape what his career might end up being. And I think Tortorella is the right guy for that stage in his career.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you know, with AV and the Tortorella comparison, it's natural to do the comparison because of the the stops that they've had, like that crossover together, and specifically in New York. And I have Rangers buddies giving me crap. Oh yeah. How do you like our dirty laundry? And it's like, I'll take Torts. I'll take AV. Like, you know, no big deal. But you know, I think the accountability factor, the no BS, it also just gives this team, and I think we've said this a lot over the last 2 years, this team hasn't had an identity. And I think he will give this team an identity. And I was watching, you know, people were posting clips of locker room speeches like, we don't effing, you know, step back. We don't, you know, he's just like, he is intense. He's not out there. You know, I picture AV and God, who is the assistant? Terrian. You know, outside the locker room, like smoking cigarettes out of like cigarette holders, like Corella DeVille, you know, between periods. And maybe that would have worked if we had like a strong vocal leader. We had a strong leader. He wasn't vocal in the form of Claude Giroux. And so I think like that combination didn't mix. And so Tortorella has this, he has a personality. He's also sat up in the booth and in the broadcast arena for the last year. And I'd like to think that he got some perspective. He probably got perspective, you know, looking at a lot of different teams on a nightly basis. He got perspective from the Blackhawks Joe Quenneville scenario. He got, you know, he has probably grown as an individual, as cheesy as that sounds. And hopefully that becomes a better coach and translates on the ice. So, you know, again, I like it. I like what he's going to bring. And again, I'm not going to sit there and be like, oh, I was, you know, cheering the Torts bandwagon from day one. I wasn't, but I'm happy with it and I'm not going to complain about it.
Think about the argument, or I shouldn't say the argument, but the quotes that come from guys who were a healthy scratch, were up in the press box, sitting there watching these games pass by, and they get to see it from a different angle. So from there, you'll hear a lot of them, and I should say a majority of them say, seeing the game from a different angle, seeing plays develop, how they break down, why things happen all along the way, gives them a different perspective. So much to your point, I completely agree. I think that year in the booth for Tortorella probably did him more favors than not, being able to watch how the game might have changed a little bit, which it changes every year, but he's been able to see some of the elite talent in a way that not a lot of us get to see. The McDavids, the Kucherovs, the Austin Matthews of the world. He gets to see those guys, from a viewpoint that we don't, and I think that can only benefit his outlook and his coaching style, because now he can account for these guys when we're playing against them, and B, if we ever have one of those guys, be able to game plan for them and put them in favorable positions.
Yeah I think that stepping away, and it's not like he's been away for 5 years in the booth. He's been away for a year, and I think that's a good amount of time, similar to the way of benching a player for a couple games. It just gets them, it you view the game from a different perspective. And I think that's exactly what Tortorella hopefully will be able to do, but still apply that fire that I ultimately think this team needs. And I keep going back to 2 years ago, the 8-2 losses to the Rangers, or, God, we had multiple 10-game losing streaks this year. Like that's unfreaking heard of. And you have to just pin it down to the accountability factor there. One thing I wanted to ask you is, like, do you have concerns? Like, Tortorella has this thing, like, do you actually still have concerns? Because it's not all rainbows and lollipops right now.
Oh no. Yeah, there's definitely concerns. I mean, I'm worried about how he's going to react if we go down the same path we did this past year. If there are multiple 10-game losing streaks, like, how is Tortorella going to act? We know he's a spitfire. We know that he's not going to mince words when he's talking to the media. Is he going to throw guys under the bus? And, like, at that point, likely it's warranted. If, 10 games go by, they haven't won a game, and we've gotten 2 assists out of a guy like Sean Couturier, I fully expect him to say something to the effect of, Sean's our guy and he's not producing right now. I don't know what I need to do to get him to produce. We're working on it, but at this point, nothing's working. Like, I'm going to have to learn to accept that that's a likely scenario, and that, hey, I'm not the coach, I'm not the owner, I don't care. Get the most out of these guys. But that is a concern of mine, how he's going to react to certain situations like that. It concerns me a little bit that, I mean, at least right now, there's a lot of fluctuation with this roster. We don't know what it's going to look like next year. And Tortorella will likely have a hand in who they pursue via trade, who they pursue via free agency. It's encouraging, but it's a double-edged sword, because then if they put that team around him, they have a bad season again like this past year, are they going to be quick to just say, nope, Tortorella's out of here too because he couldn't get it done with his guys? Like,
right.
I don't know. And there's more to dissect when it comes to whether it's Tortorella, whether it's Chuck Fletcher. We'll get into that next week too. But, definitely concerns, but I think I'm more positive about it than most people, I'm sure. But I just want to have a positive outlook because I'm sick and tired of being negative about this team.
Right. Yeah, it's the ultimate question of, will it translate? And how does Tortorella adjust his style to this team, and how much does he do so? And I think it's probably, a combination of all of it. There's not a one style fits all for everyone, because every team has different kinds of talent. And I think, like, we also forget that there is some talent on this team. We just haven't seen it in 2 years. And, that's the biggest concern. I don't think there's anything anyone can do about that. Yeah. But I back to your point about him having a say in, free agency moves, draft moves, all that. He better. Like, he absolutely better, because right now he's not going to be the first one out. Chuck's going to be the first one out if things go completely awry. But I don't know. I think
it's before that even.
yeah.
But regardless.
My biggest concern is, he has a reputation of all the focus is on him, and I don't necessarily think he does it in a flamboyant, like, oh, look at me way, but he does it in a way with the press specifically. And while we're ancillary press, we talk about it, but we're not necessarily in the room with the beat reporters and stuff like that, and bless those guys for churning away. It's going to be an interesting back and forth with some of the questions he gets, and he can handle it. He's been in a big city like New York and done well there, but that's the thing. I'm like, okay, how much of the focus is going to be on him versus the team versus players and all that sort of stuff?
I'm all for it at this point. I think, a lot of people think that too much of the focus has been on Gritty and marketing and this and that. You have a marketing executive's dream right now in John Tortorella.
Mm-hmm.
You can market the living hell out of that man if you do it right.
Mm-hmm.
So, at this point, I think it'd be smart for them to veer away from the whole Gritty shtick, keep him along because he's the mascot. You're not just going to be like, yeah, Gritty's dead now. Like, it's been, 4 years?
Right.
You're like,
right.
No, where'd Gritty go? When most of us here don't give two you-know-whats.
Every time my kids watch a game, they're like, where's Gritty? I'm like, ugh.
Gritty's dead. He's gone. He jumped off the Wells Fargo Center roof. But I think that overall, and I mean, if there's more thoughts, obviously, please plug away. But overall, I like this hire. I think that too many people are just overreacting to it. They want to sit here and say, oh, he burns out quick. Oh, he's not going to be this, that, whatever. It takes, historically, at least looking at the stats for the teams that he's coached in their first year, it does take, there's an acclimation period. And there usually is. Not every coach is going to see the conference finals their first year. Like Pete DeBoer did with San Jose, with New Jersey, but not every coach does that.
Then he flamed out, though. I'd rather have somebody who, continues to emerge.
I'd rather that slow burn,
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good hire. I think it's a good move. I think that if we can build this team up, have John Tortorella at the helm of it, I think really only good things can happen. I mean, I'm used to letdowns, so it's not going to shock me. But, hey, I'm at this point, I'm willing to try damn near anything.
I look at it, and I know we'll get into this more on Monday, but I look at it as, okay, this actually fits a kind of hire of an aggressive retool versus a rebuild. Tortorella is not a rebuild coach. I don't necessarily think the deal that's being reported of a 4x4 is like a enormous, ridiculous deal. And so I do think they're continuing to play that strategy. And you know what? Maybe the front office is a little bit smarter than we're giving them credit for. And maybe they actually have a plan in place. Maybe they do have, the players that they're targeting. Like, again, we're not just, Chuck's not just waking up and just being like, oh, know what I got to do today is hire a coach.
I had that list somewhere. Sitting in his back pocket. His jeans just got ran through the dryer.
Right. So, I'm in. I wasn't always a Torts guy, but you know what? He's our coach. Let's do it. Let's get behind him and go.
Get on board, baby. Yeah.
And if he screws up, we'll be the first ones there to yell at him.
Yeah, and I'll be like, you know what? I didn't like him. I never liked him,
We were never on the Torts train.
I was never on the Torts train. I was on a separate set of tracks.
As we spent another season under the bleachers, huffing glue, killing the pain.
No, I mean, this was just meant to be a quick hit to discuss the hire, discuss the advantages to it, what we like about it, what we might not like about it. We're again, we've alluded to it a couple times. We're going to be back here again, likely Monday night, probably hitting the podcasting apps here on Tuesday morning with the finally normal Pod Street Bullies episode. But to wrap things up, Casey, let them know where they're going to be able to find you.
You can find me on Twitter at PodStreetCasey, and that's CASEY. And yeah, I'll like anything you post, so throw it over my way.
Solid.
That's how
you
it
can
works.
Find...
That's how it works, right?
Yeah. It's not that Twitter thing anymore. Hoagie's not here. You can find me on Twitter at PodStreetBob. You can find all of us here on Twitter at PodSTBullies. Check out our affiliates also over at Flyers High and Wide, on Twitter at FlyersHW. Also, guys over at 5 Minute Major, you can find them on Twitter at 5MinMajorPod. Check out all their stuff. Check out this episode and all of our other episodes coming up here as well. It's going to be a long off season, but it's going to be a fun one. So, folks,
hey, you know what? We finally got something to talk about, though. So
we did.
Let's go.
I'm ecstatic. I'm glad we got to finally do that. But until then, and until Monday, likely, I'm not even going to do it anymore. I almost reverted back to my old ways. But hey, we got a coach now, so that's good. See you later.
Bye now. Thanks, John.